Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
Welcome back to another episode of Notes from the North. It's Sam here. This is episode 19, and this is exciting. We're just kind of getting to the end of this slow summer, and we're moving into some action, to some things happening here. I know, looking forward here, I guess this is Monday, and the rookies reported yesterday, July 25th, to the TCO Performance Center in Egan. And we know the veterans will be arriving tomorrow, July 27th. So this is exciting. There's things. It's been a little slow, been a little, not a whole lot's happening, I guess, with football in the sense of real concrete things to talk about. There is things happening. I know as we look around the NFC North, we've got drama over with the Packers, and I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there. I'm optimistic. I shouldn't say optimistic, because cheer for the Vikings, but I feel like things will work themselves out over there. But maybe there's going to be some news that happens shortly with Aaron Rodgers and now with Davante Adams. It's gonna be interesting to see. I know the biggest Vikings news lately is D.D. Westbrook re-signing back with the Vikings after I guess second stint here, and today it's just me today. Kyle is on a well-deserved break. We'll be coming back shortly, and we're just kind of getting geared up for the season. I know for new listeners. For this offseason stuff, I know we've been talking a little bit. We did some top 3 lists. If you haven't gone and checked those out, be sure to hop over to those past episodes. But with the summer and with the NFL and the way it works, sometimes there's not as much news that's happening, and so we've been trying to take it easy. But we know that when the season starts back up, we will be doing recaps Monday at noon of every Vikings game that happens, and so we're getting ready to really jump back into those things and really looking forward to talking about some of this camp stuff and the training camp stuff that happens. And so yeah, players are reporting. We know looking forward, we've got the joint practice with the Broncos that will be happening August 11th and 12th. So lots of things to be talking about. But today what I wanted to do is just hop on and talk a little bit about the Minnesota Wild because there has been a lot of things that are happening over there. And normally what I've been doing is an odds and ends section where we talk a little bit about the Minnesota Wild. But I think it's fair to say before this week, they've been one of the most busy teams, one of the teams that's got the most newsworthy action that's really been happening. And it's been quite interesting. I think one of the things that Kyle and I have really wanted to do is try to provide a positive spin on things. I know it feels like, and just getting the sense and the vibe from Minnesota Vikings Twitter, it feels like people are relatively positive. Maybe that's just the people I surround myself with, but I feel like people are relatively encouraged, and the offseason is just a time where we're kind of just guessing a little bit about what we're looking forward to and what's happening. But I think with the things that have been happening with the Minnesota Wild in hockey, I think there's probably some people that are a little bit hesitant, a little bit scared about what's happening. And for sure, there's been some moves that I would question and maybe can't put my full support behind. But what I do want to do is try to look at some of the positives, some of the things of maybe this is why they did this. Maybe this is something to look forward to. As we look at any kind of team and what's happening, you can't really judge a team until they get to the regular season. I know with the NHL, today's Monday, the free agency starts in a couple of days here. And so there's definitely some things that the Minnesota Wild are going to need to do, addressing some holes that have been made. But there's from my perspective, 4 big things that have happened. And so I just want to run through each of those things. And like I said, just provide a little bit of an optimistic viewpoint on that. I think the first and in my opinion, the largest news that's come out of the Minnesota Wild is the buyout of Parise and Sutter. And this was quite shocking. I was surprised. I think looking back, it was like, okay, this makes a little bit of sense. But in the moment when I saw this, this felt huge. And I think, honestly, with Parise, we talked a little bit at one point about the conflict he had with the coach, and just you got a sense from the playoffs and how things were going, and just his usage and ice time, that this was a relationship that was going to be hard to fix. It felt like he was on his way out, and so when he was bought out, I felt like it made some sense. I wasn't overly surprised that that happened. I think the bigger surprise was the fact that Ryan Suter got bought out as well. And I think that while Parise at his cap hit of 7.5 million was certainly it was certainly a bad contract. Parise definitely was on his way out, but Suter was a little bit more surprising. I still don't think that he was worth the 7.5. I think that that was too much. These contracts, these 13-year contracts that they both signed together, they never really, when you look back at the Minnesota Wild and what's happened, and just what they've been able to do, and any success they've been able to create, these contracts just, these players weren't able to necessarily measure up to what they've done, and so Bill Guerin made the tough decision of buying them out. Buyouts are tough because they now are impacted by these contracts. They were both supposed to have 4 years left at the $7.538 million cap hit, and now these contracts are on the books for 8 years, and to different extents. I know next year they both cost 2.37 against the cap, which is significantly lower than what was going to happen. But now we've got up until 2028, 2029 season, these contracts are there. And in my opinion, I think that each year you can hold off on buying a contract. It really gives you 2 years because the buyout spans for an extra, for double of what the contract was left, what was there. But like I said, I do want to find some positives in this. I think the main thing that will lead into the next point is the idea of the expansion draft. These were two players that, with the way their contracts were set up, they were going to have to be protected unless they waived. And I do wonder if there were some conversations about them actually waiving their no movement clauses and how those went. It is a burden, especially in year 3 and 4 here. They're only saving a few $1,000s each with the buyouts. But I do think that if you're looking for some positives, the ability to protect the players that they did protect in the expansion draft, it did make sense. And I think that we always look at sports, and sometimes we look at the numbers, and especially in a cap world and the way that the cap works, you feel a little bit hesitant about spending the money that you do, and is this really a savings? Are they really in a good spot with what they've done? But I do think that there's also some culture, some off-ice stuff, whatever it may be. I think there's probably some hope that with the new TV deals that are signed, that the cap will go up, and maybe it will be in effect in those year 3 and 4 when they're really only saving a few $1,000s. And so there's some hope there. I do wonder what this season looks like, and they've definitely got some significant money to go in on some free agents. I think you always have to be careful in spending money in free agency, but I do feel like there are some options. But I think that they were able to protect some players that I think are important to this team. Matt Dumba's name has been floating around for years in terms of, are they going to be able to keep him? Are they going to lose him? And they ended up being able to keep him. They are in a spot now where they've rid themselves of these two guys that were veterans on the team, and this is Bill Guerin has made a point of creating a new culture in Minnesota. I also will say, just another positive, is that the fact that they're only $833,000 each on the cap for the final 4 years isn't that significant. Like, I think that you look at it, and like I said, it's an 8-year commitment now to these contracts, but years 5 to 8, to have 1.5, 1.6, I guess is 1.65, million in dead cap space there. It's not ideal. It's not what you would hope for, but it isn't that significant. So moving on from these guys when they did, while I maybe don't fully see it being an ideal decision, I do think the expansion draft was significant, culture was significant, and now they have a clear picture of what things look like moving forward, and they have some clear needs of what they need to fill in free agency in the coming days. As I talked about, the expansion draft was potentially a part of this decision making, and with the expansion draft, the Minnesota Wild end up losing Soucy here, and I think that's not an ideal loss, but what I would say is that, looking at the positive again, losing him over Kekkonen feels like a win. I know it's not ideal. I know it's not necessarily what you would want. Soucy's this big 6'5" defenseman, especially losing Suter. It means that now you've got two holes on this team's defense. But I do feel like out of the two, you probably would rather lose Soucy, at least from my opinion. I do feel like Kekkonen, while he maybe didn't have the greatest season last year, he is a big piece of their future potentially, and you don't know how long Cam Talbot will be around. You need goalies, and to be able to have that tandem come back, especially considering how well they played. They weren't significant, but they were definitely above average, the Minnesota Wild goaltending last year. And you really don't want goaltending that's going to hamper you, or if it's a weakness, that is absolutely killer for a team. So I do feel like that's good. And so I feel like while you don't want to lose Soucy, you knew you're going to lose one of the two. I think that the real positive thing is that Minnesota didn't give up additional assets to try to protect one of these two guys, or to protect these two guys. The Seattle asking price, this expansion team seemed to be quite high in terms of what people were asking for, what the team was asking for to protect a player. And so I feel like the idea of being able to realize, you know what, you're going to lose someone, not ideal, but this is just part of the process. Everyone's going to lose someone, and I feel like they were able to keep a lot of their core, a lot of their important pieces that they've been building for quite some time now. I still think that they'll be able to fill in the holes around those players that are left, and be able to ice a team that will hopefully compete for the playoffs again, depending on what they do with this cap space they now have. And thinking about the cap space, I know one of the other biggest stories this offseason for the Minnesota Wild has been Kaprisov and not having a contract. I will say that as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, and watching as some of these star players have fought for deals and gone through all these negotiation tactics, I am not worried about Kaprizov going back to the KHL. It does sound like there have been rumors about that being a negotiation tactic. Other people have kind of doused that fire and been able to say, you know what, I don't think this is actually a concern. I think that they're going to be okay. These things are going to draw out. It could go all the way into training camp, but at the end of the day, I think they're going to get this done. I'm not worried about Kaprizov leaving, about him not signing. He is a significant piece. He's important. He knows that. And all the things that may come out, there's going to be, this may get ugly at some point, and this is just the way negotiations go. I know with Mitch Marner and with Toronto, they were talking about him going over to Europe and potentially playing, and these things it's just part of the process. So I say that there's certainly hope for Kaprizov, and all it takes is for the two sides to realize, okay, enough for the games. We're going to get this done. I don't know exactly what you'd hope for. In some ways, you kind of hope for an 8-year deal, but I wouldn't be surprised if he signs somewhere around a 6-year deal, and maybe it's around $8 million per. Who knows? Those are predictions. That's what I would say. That's what I would guess. It seems significant for a player who's only played one game in the NHL, but he has enough of a track record in the KHL and now in the NHL that I think that he is worth significant money and significant investment in terms of term, and if he comes in lower than that, then I think that that's a great deal and a great situation. The last point, just in wrapping up, was the NHL draft. I do feel like, looking at Minnesota, that they actually had a pretty good draft. I know that getting Jesper Wallstedt at 20 feels like a big win. They have Kokkonen, they have Talbot. To add him to their goaltender ranks and to have him as a potential piece, he's being compared to the names of these big goalies that have been drafted in the past year with Spencer Knight and Askarov. And I think whenever you can add an elite goalie, it's always a risk going in the first round and doing that. But it feels like he is the smart goalie. He's described as by Corey Pronman as a very smart goalie, a top prospect, and he projects as a quality starting goalie in the NHL if he develops well. Goalies are always a risk. There's always a potential that things could fall off, but I think that it's worth the risk, especially at 20. At pick number 20, they traded up from 22 to jump ahead of Edmonton, switching picks with Edmonton and jumping ahead of Boston, when there was conversations at different points of him coming in as a top 10 pick as a goalie, which is quite rare. So I think that this is solid. And they also added 26 Carson Lambos, and this is a guy who's struggled with some injuries. He, a year ago, looked like he was going to be even higher pick in the first round, and with the injuries slipped a little bit. I think it's worth taking another, like I said, a risk on him. He's a solid player, first pass defenseman. Pronman describes him as having good offensive zone vision and puck handling. There's a good article over in The Athletic by Pronman regarding all this, and I do feel like they've got some defensemen that are here. They've got Kalen Addison, Damian Hunt, and Ryan O'Rourke, all as these defensemen that are kind of waiting in the wings. And while they may use free agency to address the defensive holes this year, I do feel like they've got some pieces that are coming up that will be making a push for roster spots in the near future and add to the likes of Spurgeon and Dumba and Brodin. So I think that overall, I feel like while there's going to be some difficulties and while there might be some opinions on maybe some poor decisions or questionable decisions, I do think it's a good wait and see approach. I was going to say and mention that I'm not a draft expert, but just from what I've heard and even looking at what happened, I do feel like the picks that were made in the later rounds have been well received by a lot of the draft people that I do follow and see, and I feel like overall, I know they were given a draft grade of B. We're gonna see. I think that they did a good job. So that'll wrap up the coverage. I think that Kyle and I are definitely looking forward to coming at you next week and providing a little bit of an update on some of the things that have happened, and we start looking at some of the battles that are here in training camp. Make sure to stop by the Vikings Gazette. Kyle's got 3 training camp predictions, and there's a lot of good things being written over there. I know Cole, who was our guest in the last 2 episodes, has continued to put out quality articles looking back at some of these Hall of Fame players, and there's going to be a lot of writing that's going to be done and articles that are pumping out as we get ready for the start of the season. So like I said, we're really looking forward to it. We are kind of in a figuring out stage of how many episodes we're doing, which weeks we're doing them for the month of August. But for sure, when the season starts, we're going to be back to every Monday providing a recap of the game, getting down to breaking down what's happening. And you know what? I feel quite excited, quite optimistic about where this Minnesota Vikings team is going. And I think that especially with the news and what's happening around them, I feel like they're actually getting some recognition from people even outside of the Minnesota Vikings organization and fan base of this being a quality team. So certainly excited about this. Looking forward to them really bringing it, and we will see how it goes. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting, and I think at this point we're just ready for games. I want to watch football. It's been a long time. It's been a long summer, and so looking forward to football starting. But for sure, check out the Vikings Gazette. Be alert for what's happening, and make sure to follow on Twitter too, and all that good stuff. So we hope you have a good week. Hope you enjoy it, and we will talk with you next week. Thanks.